All right, last night finished A Clockwork Orange. This book was crazy. This book is crazy as hell. So it follows a villain protagonist. He's not an anti-hero. He's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He has pretty much no redeeming qualities at all, except for youth. The book starts out, he's like 15 years old, and he's gangbanging in the UK. And like I said, it goes into violence, murder, rape, drugs, and he gets arrested. He goes to prison, and the government does like this experimental conditioning on him. So whenever he even witnesses or has violent thoughts, then he has a painful, sick reaction to it. So this conditioning that he undergoes, he's released from prison, and that puts him at the mercy of all of his victims and at his enemies. And so it's really interesting. I would put it somewhere in between Crime and Punishment and American Psycho, chronologically, ideologically, geographically. It's like right in the middle, but it transcends all that, and that it's way more radical. Crime and Punishment was very philosophical. This is quite philosophical too, but it's also hilarious. It's way funnier. I mean, Crime and Punishment had its moments, and American Psycho was absurd, but this is hilariously absurd. And I mean, if you can laugh at these things, I can laugh at these things. So I found it to be very, very funny. Also, it's not difficult. It kind of is difficult because he uses this slang, this jargon that's completely invented. It's called NADSAT. And so like all of the teenagers, the youth speak in this slang, this very dense slang called NADSAT. And it's kind of like childish gibberish mixed with Russian, mixed with just criminal terminology. So at the beginning of the book, the first page, it sounds like complete nonsense. But by the end of the book, you understand his language. And so it's like, these are one of the ways that the author kind of wins you over to your villain protagonist, to where you kind of empathize with them. Because by the end of the book, you're speaking his language. You understand it fluidly. And he's also the protagonist. His name is Alex. And he's also somewhat charming. He speaks to him. He refers to himself as your humble narrator. And he uses language like, oh my brothers. He's talking to you. He's referring to you, the reader, as oh my brothers. So even though he's committing these horrendous crimes, he talks to you like you're one of the boys. And he talks to you in this slang that you're picking it up as you go through the book. So he's kind of winning your empathy in that way. But he's still a villain. He's still a bad dude. So it was really interesting. It was very entertaining, and it's somewhat philosophical. I don't think that it's quite the commentary on government as other people might say it is. The government is involved, but it's not so much. It's kind of more on human nature, and not necessarily typical human nature, but the extremes of human nature. But anyways, it was very interesting. I recommend it. Not for women and children. I got the movie too. I'm gonna watch the movie, but I'm gonna have to watch it alone. My wife doesn't want to see it, and I wouldn't show it to the kids. So, um, crazy. It's not very long, so if you want a short read, something that you can just read, it's short, but it's not, like I said, it's not necessarily easy because you're going to have to use your brain to work through this bizarre slang, and that's going to take some getting used to. Of course, you can look up the appendix on Wikipedia. You can look up the appendix on Wikipedia and see what all the words mean. But then you're basically flipping between two books. But I recommend it. It's crazy as hell, and you just have to laugh. The first half of the book, it's actually divided into 3 parts. So the first part, he's committing all these terrible crimes. The second part of the book, he's institutionalized and reconditioned for society. And then the third part of the book is a reflection of the first part, where it's kind of like his punishment and retribution for all of his victims and all of his enemies, because he is rendered harmless. He's rendered impotent. He can't defend himself. If he has a violent thought, he immediately has sensations of pain and retching, as if he wants to vomit. So it's pretty hilarious. He gets jumped by like a group of 90-year-old men that one of them he had harassed and abused previously. They come back to beat him up, and I mean, they're like 90-year-old men, so they can't do any damage to him. But it's just hilarious. Like, he's getting beat up in a library. He's getting beat up in a library by a group of just these geriatric old nerds, basically. And it was pretty hilarious. Another part, it's pretty bizarre. It's pretty insightful. I don't even know if I can say it on here. But in the first part of the book, like the 3rd, 4th chapter, they break into this house and gang rape this woman. Later on the 3rd part of the book, he returns to that house, and the liberal husband is like fighting for the rights of convicts and criminals. And Alex, the narrator, is a perfect subject to use for his political purposes, because he's been incarcerated. He's been conditioning, like mind control. And so they want to use him. So what they do is they write his story up and submit it to a newspaper. And then they lock him inside of this high-rise apartment, blasting classical music. Well, all of these conditioning that Alex has underwent, it's been by these videos that are set to this classical music. And so when he hears this classical music, it sets off his conditioning, and he has sensations of pain and illness. So he tries to jump out of the window. He jumps out the window. He's just trying to kill himself. And that was planned by like the opposition party. They put him in this position against the government because they're protesting against the government. So the opposition party has set him up for him to kill himself. So it's kind of like, do the ends justify the means? The opposition party, they're against the totalitarian state, right? But they have treated Alex even worse than the totalitarian government has. They literally tried to kill him. They tried to induce him to kill himself. I mean, the government didn't even do that. They were trying to recondition him for society so they could try to empty out the prisons so that they could imprison their political opponents, the opposition party, the liberals. So it is very interesting. It is somewhat philosophical, but it's also bizarre and violent and disgusting and hilarious at the same time. So it's not one of those you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll cheer. It's not that. Like, you'll laugh and I laughed a lot. It was funny, but it's also quite disturbing.